We gotta look at this thing. Right. Yeah, if you put me in that position, believe me, I'll make a difference.
Hey folks, welcome to office hours. We're getting everybody admitted here in the lobby. Get started in just a couple minutes. Excited to share a couple hours of office time with everyone and answer any questions that we have. We do have a really short presentation prepared that will hopefully get the conversation started around evidence and some things that we've been seeing in the first week and a half of the challenge process. But we won't dive full into it until everybody has a chance to join here. Make sure that presenting that to as many people as possible.
And hey, everybody, it's Jessica Randall from My High. Wanted to flag one key difference in the setup between this and if you've joined us for some of the other partnership roundtables is that this is set up as a meeting, which means we did click the setting that lets us, kind of turn off everybody's mics right now, but you can mute and unmute at will. So we're going to ask you to try to stay muted unless you're actively asking a question after Erin has wrapped up the presentation and when we move into that question time.
All right, folks, we are going to begin. Just for your awareness, we'll spend a lot of time, probably the majority of the time at the end of the presentation, just answering questions, talking through any problems that maybe you're facing with the challenge portal, questions you have specifically about evidence, and hope to today kind of maybe tie together some things that we've been seeing as well as some suggestions that we have with regard to evidence. Of course, My High office cannot tell you what type of challenge to submit at any given time during the process, but we want to help you as much as we can and create this win-win environment where you're not frustrated, nor are we, and we're able to either accept or reject challenges based on the evidence that comes in and not waste anyone's time. And there are already thousands of challenges that have been submitted. We expect that there will be tens of thousands of challenges through the course of the challenge process. And so we want to be as respectful as possible in the process, that we are being efficient with your time and with our time. And so that's why we kind of wanted to talk today a little bit about some of the things that we've been seeing with regard to evidence, bring up some things to remember, and also point you in the right direction in terms of resources that you can use and reference while you're submitting your challenges. And so we're going to probably bang that drum a lot today, that there are some very specific resources that we encourage you to be consulting and looking at when you're submitting challenges, because that's where the data is. What type of evidence is, and you should and shouldn't be submitting, what type of evidence goes with what type of challenge. And just right out of the gate, proper evidence is key. We've already had to reject a number of challenges just because of, I won't use the word bad or good evidence, that puts a moral imperative, maybe just insufficient evidence. That evidence has to be sufficient to support the challenge claim that's put in. And My High is trying to be as unbiased as possible with only accepting challenges that have appropriate evidence. And so on this slide, you see some things to remember. We know that the map needs to be updated, maybe corrected is even a better word. And that's why there is a challenge process. So we can get to this point where we believe that the map represents unserved, underserved, and served locations correctly, and which locations that are underserved or unserved eligible then for BEAD funding. And we won't know that unless the map has been challenged where those locations aren't correct. And We also understand, and we've been talking to many providers during this process, that there is a newer BDC version that many of you have submitted data to with regard to the fabric, and that the portal is possibly not using that version. The portal is using the version from February of 2023. And please correct me if I'm wrong on that one, Jess.
Yep, it's BDC version 3 as updated February 7, 2024.
24, sorry.
Nope, no worries.
And that it kind of is what it is. That's what we have to go off of, and we'll use that data and and go from there with regard to challenging and reviewing challenges for locations. Another reason that we're taking a really, really hard look at evidence and trying to do our best on accepting or rejecting challenges, that because many types or many challenges that come in won't have anybody available to rebut them. And so they will just go on through the process, and without someone having a second chance to look and say this challenge is or isn't appropriate, or this challenge data or evidence is or isn't appropriate. MyHigh may be the only eyes that look at the evidence other than the challenger himself or herself. And so we're being particularly diligent to review those types of challenges. And finally, this kind of all comes to this point that NTIA will ultimately look at these challenges. Certainly, they're not going to look at every single challenge. They'll probably do spot checks. But if NTIA has to reject challenges at the end of the process, it will likely create a review situation that delays everything going forward. And we're trying to keep this challenge process to a total of 120 days. And we want to make sure that any reviews done by NTIA are able to be signed off on and passed through, because we've already done our due diligence of making sure that challenges are submitted accordingly with the appropriate evidence. So we're trying to be as thorough as possible. And so we're just asking for your patience and maybe even your grace a little bit with us. If we have to reject your challenge, we'll give you a very definitive reason why, encourage you to resubmit that challenge with different evidence or the appropriate evidence or the appropriate challenge type. And it's not just because we're trying to make your life difficult, but because we want to have the best map possible and make sure that we fly through the NTIA review as smoothly as possible. Also, the NTIA standards are something to keep in mind. And so we just kind of listed some things to think about with regard to evidence, that the evidence that you're submitting along with your challenge clearly identifies the locations that you're referring to. We've seen some evidence come in that shows a very generic type of map, maybe without addresses or location IDs or anything that would help us substantiate or corroborate the challenge. And so with your evidence, please make sure that the locations you're challenging are clearly identified in the evidence. Also, that your evidence satisfies any specific requirements listed out in the BEAD challenge process document, that certain challenges require certain kind of evidences for corroboration, and we need to make sure that your evidence includes that. That would be another reason MyHigh office would be forced to reject a challenge, because the evidence just didn't satisfy the right type of requirements. And those include things like maximum advertised download and upload speed and latency, among others. And in our initial presentations, inviting you to be a part of the challenge process, we didn't spend a lot of time going through all the different types of evidence for all the challenges, because there's a lot. There's dozens of those different types of evidence. So really inviting you as a provider or as an eligible challenger to take the time to look at the resources provided, so that you know what type of challenge am I submitting and what type of evidence will be required for MyHigh to be able to accept my challenge. And that big orange box kind of summarizes it. Could someone with no knowledge of where I'm coming from, my organization or my community or my company, take this evidence and look at it and understand how it meets the standards set out in initial proposal volume 1, approved by NTIA? Could they look at the evidence and say, okay, I see why this location is being challenged. I see the evidence that's been provided, and I it would be hard to disagree that there should be a challenge to how this location is showing up on the map. That's kind of what we need to be able to say when we review each of the hundreds and now thousands and possibly tens of thousands of pieces of evidence and that are associated with that many challenges as they come in. So these resources are very, very critical to the process, and we're going to link these in the chat. They're available on the MyHigh website, but these I would say should become your best friend references as you go through the challenge process. The initial proposal, volume 1, that describes and talks about the challenge process itself. The broadband map user guide, which is the how-to manual of how to navigate the portal, submit challenges, and deal with any errors accordingly. It also has an appendix and a matrix that specifically talks about evidences. And then our office prepared a memo and sent it out, and hopefully all of you received that memo. If you didn't, we'll link it here in the chat that talks about even further guidance about evidence, what type of evidence would really serve you well to submit with what type of challenge. And again, we're just going to say it over and over and over again that proper evidence is key. And it's not because we really enjoy just being sticklers and saying no. We want to say yes. We want to achieve universal availability by having the right data and a great map. And we can only do that with your challenges if the proper evidence is there. So that's just kind of a real brief presentation. And now we'll just kind of open up this time to any questions you have. Invite you to maybe raise your hand, and we'll call on you in case a lot of people want to talk or present at the same time. That'll kind of keep things in order. And then we'll just invite you to, after someone from MyHigh calls on you, to begin diving into these questions. And hopefully we can help one another as we talk specifically about evidence and then maybe any other questions you have as well. I see Jeff Snyder was the first with his hand up on my screen. So Jeff, why don't you go ahead and tell us what your question is? What are you thinking about today?
So yeah, my question is related to rebutting challenges. So when I log into the portal, I see 11 challenges awaiting rebuttal under the Open Rebuttals tab, and yet no one in our organization has received any email notifications of any challenges being submitted. So I just want to confirm that anything we see in the Open Rebuttals tab is indeed waiting for us to respond and rebut that. And also, I guess, ask for clarification on whether we should be receiving email notifications or not.
With regard to the notifications question, absolutely yes. You should be receiving notifications, and we did have some technical difficulties in the first week or so of the process. We've been working with our contractor, and we have a sense that now those notifications are going out. The notifications get batched, so you'll probably get a large chunk of notifications first thing each morning that you either have challenges that have been rejected or rebuttals awaiting. Some type of challenges will end up in the open rebuttal area of the portal for anybody to rebut, depending on the type of challenge. So those ones you may not get a rejection, but ones that are specific to your location, you should be getting rejections. And in the next couple of days, if you feel like you're still not getting those notifications, we want to know about that so we can submit those bug reports.
And I'd like to hop in and just lift up and really re-emphasize some things that Aaron has said there in that answer, which is there's kind of two key places to pay attention to regarding rebuttals. One is your own dashboard that you can see within your account. You know, I'm logged in on behalf of Acme Internet, and John Smith has challenged 123 Main Street and whether or not Acme Internet actually serves it. That is a challenge that you would be notified of the opportunity to rebut. That is a challenge that appears on your dashboard when you're logged in on behalf of Acme Internet, because that is a challenge directly to service that you provide, or to some aspect of the service that you provide. Open rebuttals are what we think about when we talk about the idea that there's no direct rebutter for certain types of challenges. This is, if you were Acme Internet and you filed a claim that said, I do provide service to 123 Main Street, we don't have an email address for the homeowner that lives there or the business that lives there, and 123 Main Street doesn't get notified to say that Acme Internet has filed a challenge to say, actually, we do provide service at your location. What happens to those challenges, those services available challenges, the location is a CAI tape challenges, the ones that don't have an obvious direct rebutter, those go into the open rebuttals queue. Those are available to anyone to take a look and rebut, and notifications do not go out to anyone because by definition, if they're in the open rebuttals queue, there's not a direct rebutter associated. I hope that makes sense, Jeff. Does that help clarify for you?
It partially.
Okay.
We've got when I log in, I see 25 under my dashboard listed as completed, but we haven't rebutted anything yet. And then there's nothing showing as awaited rebuttal. So I guess I'm just not understanding what we actually have to make sure we're rebutting since we haven't gotten any notifications yet.
Yeah. So a challenge would be moved to completed if it was submitted and was rejected. If it is rejected, you will get communication for anything that's submitted in the first 25 days of the challenge submission process. We will provide communication about what the rejection, what we were missing out of the evidence. Like we need some sort of a diagram, or we need some other piece of evidence that fills one of those like key bullet points that you would see in initial proposal volume 1, like the type of things that we have to see. When Erin's presentation talks about the specific requirements, we anticipate a big influx of challenges toward the end. And so anything that comes in on the 26th day of the challenge process or later, we do not anticipate providing that sort of communication. But if something is rejected, it will move down into your completed, because there's no next step with that. If somebody's challenge to service that you provide is accepted, then you have an opportunity to rebut that. Does that
Okay,
help?
and then if under challenge status it says
Yeah.
unknown, does that mean it's just waiting to be approved or not? And if it is approved, it'll move up to awaiting rebuttal?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Lynn, go ahead.
Hi there. A couple things. So I just want to make sure that I am understanding it correctly. So when you click on open rebuttals, yes, you see those open rebuttals for everybody. But if I want to see my actual challenges that I submitted, I can go to my settings and challenge dashboard, and that shows me the challenges that I have submitted. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. One thing that I've noticed when I'm doing my challenges is it'll show in the upper right-hand corner that, the challenge has been submitted. But when does it actually show on the address that something has been submitted? Because I'm doing this in between other things, I feel like I've already duplicated efforts and entered in the same challenge twice, because on the actual map where I'm submitting the challenge, it's not saying that something's been submitted for that location. So do you know when that changes on the map that it has been submitted?
Yes. At least I know when it is meant to. And that has to do with what Jeff was talking about the unknown status that you can see on the dashboard. So a location should show as challenged if a challenge is accepted. And so, like, if MyHigh opens that up and moves it into awaiting rebuttal, then that is when that challenged, I heard somebody call it a chip, that tag, that chip, that label, whatever, appears on the map for that location.
Okay. All right, so I apologize in advance for a couple duplications there. And then the other one, I just wanted to let you know of a bug on the map that I came across as I'm looking up addresses. Uh, Sometimes when I enter in an address on the map, the address will come up like unknown and in the middle of a field. For instance,
Mhm.
the location pointer will show up in a field on the map, but it
Mhm.
says that it's unknown. But then if I click on the closest uh, house that has a green dot or has, a dot on it, then I see that it is actually that address. So that's just something that I found in
Yeah.
multiple locations where, I first type it in and it says that it's not a location. But then when I actually go on the map and start clicking through the BSLs, the address is there.
Yeah. 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 Um, I'm first off going to say that I am not a GIS professional by trade or training, so my what I'm about to say might be a little bit approximated. But broadly speaking, the data that underpins the everything that shows up in the Michigan broadband map starts with the fabric. Um, a lot of the inputs there have to do with parcel data. A lot of the inputs there have to do with things that were found by CostQuest, FCC's national contractor. And yeah, the things you're describing are real, true issues that exist and actually filter up to us from the fabric. Um, so we are somewhat limited in our ability to address them because we are required by NTIA rules to use the FCC fabric to underpin our challenge process, even with the acknowledgement that there are, um, Eric described it as the funky parts of the fabric, which I think is probably the very best available phrase. So,
So,
yeah, I hear it.
so if one of those challenges gets rejected, then I guess I would probably just reach out to you and say, no, this is actually a location and it is on the map. It's just not in the right. Yeah, like you said, it's on the parcel.
Hmm.
It's just not showing up as a location on the map until you click on the actual BSL label. So
Yeah,
that's fine.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, then.
Thanks. Alexis,
Yes,
you
hello.
go ahead.
So you kind of have answered most of my question, but I want to just confirm, make sure I fully understand. On that completed section, effectively, we can just kind of ignore it until it pops up into awaiting rebuttal or something similar. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think completed is another way of saying there are no additional steps to take with regard to this challenge. So
Okay.
yes, that's just a place where if you want to check that for your records, something like that, but there's no step to take for anything that's listed under completed.
Okay. And then my next question, initially on a couple, we've only had a few, but a couple challenges where it's awaiting rebuttal.
Mhm.
In the first few days, I was able to see their evidence file. But as of the past couple days, they're kind of all gone. I don't see any
Mm.
evidence files on there anymore. I'm happy to send you guys personally a screenshot if you want to see. But yeah,
Yeah.
the evidence files are gone, so I can't quite see, what they've seen or what they've got. Um, so I wanted to see if that's a known issue or if that's something that hasn't been reported yet.
That one is new to me, Alexis. So yeah, if you would send through over email a screenshot, that'd be helpful.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think that's pretty much everything. As far as created challenges, by a provider, do those stay in that orange created challenges section and just get a response that way? Or when they're finished and my high has made their determination, does that move to completed as well?
They would move to completed.
Okay,
Yeah, most likely they would progress through awaiting rebuttal, but yeah.
okay. And then in that case, is there ever going to be an option for maybe a download of all of the completed challenges with their statuses or something like that to get a feel for where everything landed in your challenge process?
Mhm. Yes, we will publish final determinations at the conclusion of the challenge process after NTIA approval.
Okay.
So I don't have an exact publication date, but it's definitely in that like August, September kind of realm because we'll wrap things up by July 22nd. We'll submit things promptly to NTIA. And then depending on what their approval queue looks like at that time, when we get it back, we'll be able to post it.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
For those putting questions in the chat, not ignoring you in any way, but we'll just go through the folks with their hands up first, and then I will read those questions in the chat. That helps us get them on the recording also. Certainly we understand that not everybody can ask their question either on camera or audio via audio. So don't feel bad if you need to put a question in the chat. We'll just get to those after everyone has had a chance to ask theirs with their hand up. So Jenny Hoffman, go ahead. What's your question?
Oh, can you hear me? Yes, unmute. Here it goes. I have a question regarding the general area that is considered funded, and maybe there is, all the homes are in there that we know of, but one of the homes within this large, Green Robin grant swath, one of them says it's served with 5 gig down and 5 gig up by PFN, and it's absolutely not true. Do we waste our time trying to challenge that?
What I would say is that any location that is showing up as served at the end of the challenge process would not be able to be funded for infrastructure construction through BEAD. And so if a location is showing up as served and you know that that service claim is wrong, then that would be an important challenge to file.
Thank you very much. We had these little pieces we're all trying to figure out with such little
Absolutely.
time. So thank you. We will make sure that happens. Another question is the library in St. Ignace. When I put the address into the map, the new map, it's not there, and it's considered,
Yeah.
a anchor institution. Is there a reason for that? Do we need to worry about that?
Yes and yes. And I'm trying first to
And
find, oh, go ahead.
so should the library be challenging that? Does the individual library go to their boss's library? Because I have a relationship with Sharon and Chad there at our local library. And do I bring this to their attention? I mean, I'm the one probably of the few people that are looking at this, but I feel committed to trying to help. So should I
Yeah.
investigate further? Okay. All
So,
right, I will. And then the other thing.
oh, can I pause on that
Okay.
and say for a second?
Oh,
There
yes.
is a reason.
Yes.
Yes, there is a reason. And that is that many CAIs are not appropriately represented as locations at all in the FCC fabric. FCC is quite good about tracking businesses and residences, but many CAIs are not represented on the map. So some are, many are not. Moving into the challenge process, MyHigh had done a best efforts set of research to gather. It's approximately 22,000 locations that get represented on the map as CAIs with their triangle, right? CAIs are triangles, well, regular BSLs, businesses and
Yes.
residences are circles, right?
Okay.
And so we know that there are places like this library that you're describing that for whatever reason don't show up in the fabric and weren't caught in our research. And so those are also important challenges to submit. That is I have to just look up the actual code. You would assume that I'd memorized these at this point, but I haven't. But it's one of those, this location is a CAI challenge. It is a code C challenge. Any eligible challenger can submit a challenge to a location to claim it as an eligible CAI. If there is a CAI location that is not represented on the map, then there's also instruction on how to submit the fact that that location needs to be listed. We cannot add BSLs to the map through the challenge process, with the one single exception that NTIA allows us, that we can add CAIs that are not identified as BSLs in the FCC fabric.
So if we are going to challenge that, I mean, the proof would be that it's on the internet as the library?
Yeah, the proof would be this is a library.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Because
right. Okay.
what you're doing,
Okay.
yeah, what you're doing is saying, hey, this falls into one of your CIA categories, and the map needs to be updated to show it.
Okay. Okay. That is really important for me to know. And then there's another question I have is that our township hall never even thought about myself or anybody really doing a speed test, because we had definitely 25 down, 3 up. No one was complaining about the internet. But I took this information to the board last night. I thought, oh, I'll just go on the internet and open up the MyHigh, the new map. And it was not functioning. I'm like, what the heck? How come this isn't functioning? So I did a speed test in our little township hall, and it says that we should have from charter 1,000 down and 35 up. But my speed test from the MyHigh broadband website, it wouldn't work because I couldn't get on it because I think the internet was slow. And it came back as on my own personal speed test on my computer as 200 down and 8 up. So I should be challenging that, right?
So what you're describing is potentially a type or a code S, a speed test challenge. There are some requirements for speed test challenges, like you have to take 3 speed tests on 3 different days. But what I would flag for you is that a township hall would be a public-facing government facility, and so that has a different speed threshold for a CAI to be considered unserved and therefore, or underserved and therefore BEAD eligible. And so take a look at that CAI without qualifying speed, because I realize it's not just a type S. I'm scrolling to tell you the correct. It's a code G, like George, CAI with qualifying broadband unavailable. And so on page 30 of the user guide, you'll find information about the type of evidence that's necessary to support that type of challenge.
Because on the map, it's just a location. It's not a CAI. It's just a green dot.
Okay, so you've got a couple different things happening there, and you would challenge them separately because they move separately through the system. One of them could be this should be listed as a CAI, and one of them could be this CAI does not have CAI qualifying broadband service.
And off the top of your head, do you know what the CAI qualifying broadband services would be?
1,000 by 1,000. Yeah, it's a symmetrical gig service.
Oh my goodness, this is so important. Okay, thank you, thank you. I also had another question about the newspaper. Is there something in particular I should be getting into the newspaper? Is there some sort of help, or just send this the links to these, the broadband map and the challenge? Would that be enough? Is there something?
Say service providers, nonprofit organizations, tribal governments, and local units of government. Those are the types of entities that need all of the robust set of tools that are available through the Michigan Broadband Map, the MyHigh State Challenge Portal. Individual members of the public, so just individual Michiganders who might be interested in reporting problems that they personally experience at their home or business, may find the tools available at Merit's platform to be more accessible and more user-friendly for them. And that's just merit.edu/challenge. And so if I were putting something in the newspaper, I would just be thinking about which is my audience and reading that newspaper, and figuring out, which set of links to provide.
Perfect. I think that you gave me that good information. And there's just another broad question about St. Ignace. All of a sudden, with this new map, everybody has 5 gig down and up from PFN. Everybody's green dots. So the city manager is like, well, we're not using PFN, so we don't really care. So whatever. And there's nobody that really has the bandwidth to challenge all that. Would it be something that this community, like my own township, should sign up as like a community challenge, and then one person could go in there and look at them, or do they have to do all that hexagon stuff? I mean, it's a huge area and no one's really paying attention. There's like 15 days.
Yeah. So one of the things, there's a little bit of nuance happening here in that it was discovered by My High as we prepared for the challenge process that there are places, there are locations that have a residential type that are passed by service that is available only to businesses. We are working with Merit to look at opportunities to file challenges specific to business-only service being provided, or business-only service, and therefore not available to the residents that it passes. I would not in any way discourage anybody from filing challenges, that fit that description if you have the capacity to do so. But we are working to take care of that through the challenge process as best we can. So basically, don't not do it, but put it lower on your priority list.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's a tough one because, I've been
Mhm.
working on the marina in particular.
Yeah.
And to say, oh, all these people are serving it. No way. You can't even get underneath the MDOT road to give any of that service that's on the other side of the road to anybody on the water side. It's just not physically possible. So it was kind of getting me stressed. So I will worry about the other smaller ones.
Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe I'll be back to another one of these awesome calls and ask other questions.
Well,
That'd
we're
be
going to
great,
do them
Jenny.
weekly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Mitch Shapiro, why don't you go next? Are you there, Mitch?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
I'm just
we can hear
trying
you.
to, just rummaging around, trying to learn from all the comments here. Yeah, I guess I'll focus on the CAI challenge, which is kind of the, I just looked at it and the speed, available speed, and it looks like the evidence needs to be sort of a demonstrated effort to get symmetrical gigabit service. If I understood what's in the volume 1, maybe there was some other references there, but I looked, I clicked on a location that is a CAI, a triangle there, and the qualifying broadband available. So CAI qualifying broadband available. Is that the right place to go to challenge the availability of symmetrical gigabit at that location? First of all, that challenge, that's what you click on when you're going through the challenge steps.
Yes. If I'm following correctly, but yes, you'd want to click on that location, and then you should have the same, the same workflow step for where you would click to submit a challenge like you would if you were at a home or business.
Okay, because what I see here is, so are you going to do it? Is it because I'm looking at the screen? I say the CAI type, download speed, upload speed, and explanation. I don't really understand. Are you asking for like a speed test of that CAI? And one of the reasons I'm asking that is if the CAI doesn't subscribe to the highest
Yeah.
service level, then that speed test is kind of irrelevant. So, and then what the explanation is, because I just wouldn't understand if a CAI decides to do that. Now that the CAI, if it's a nonprofit, it could file its own, but it can also work with the county to file it. So assume, let's say that the county is filing it on behalf of the CAI. How do we make sense of this form to submit a challenge? I just don't understand it.
Yeah. So Mitch, it sounds like there's a few different potential scenarios kind of floating in each other's realm here. So a type G, a code G challenge could encompass the idea that no connection is available at all, that infrastructure is not there that would allow that qualifying connection. There is no fiber. It could also accompany the idea that there is some sort of physical, or encompass the idea that there is some sort of physical infrastructure that exists, but it's not capable of providing that BEAD qualifying service. And both of those things, all of those things could be captured under the idea of that type G challenge. And so essentially, I want to kind of point you back to the question that Aaron had on the slide in that orange box. What would I need to submit as evidence to show a person who doesn't know anything about this community, anything about this organization, an understanding of why this challenge should be accepted? So in this case, you'd look at the Code G. You could look in the initial proposal, volume 1, which is this is the standards. That's where we say these are the standards that NTIA approved for each of these challenges. If you wanted more detail, more specific examples, you can and should review the information available in the user guide and in the additional guidance that we sent around yesterday. All of those things are available on our website. And the key core question for the Code G challenge and all the other challenges is, if I was trying to tell someone or trying to show someone who has no knowledge of this organization, this community, the reason that this challenge should be upheld, or, if you're working on a rebuttal, this rebuttal should be upheld, would the evidence that I am putting together demonstrate that? So if you need to show that that CAI has internet or does not have the ability to access internet at an appropriate speed, then a speed test would be appropriate to include. If you want to show that that you tried to get service and you were told by Acme Internet that no, we won't serve to you, we don't have infrastructure in place that will let you, then a communication around that. It's difficult to say in a very specific way which evidence is going to
Well, what I don't
answer that
understand is how
question.
you submit the evidence. I haven't clicked. Well, it looks to me like the screen, and I assume if I'm going to go make sure, because it doesn't say G, it's a CAI qualifying broadband available challenge. I don't see a G on the website, but I understand that's in the documents. So that is the equivalent of challenge type G. So I just see that speed and explanation. I see no room, unless after this page, which I haven't filled out, there's a place to attach things. I mean, there's an explanation box. Is the explanation box? It's just very different than what I expected to see. And, is there another screen that says you can attach a document showing that knows evidence showing it? Because I think in the volume 1, it just says evidence that an effort was made, and I don't really see, aside from the explanation box, which I haven't tried to use, that there's any way to submit that evidence. Just the speeds on the form. I don't know if anyone on the MyHigh team is looking at that page. Once you click on the service issue is CI qualifying broadband, And that's the screen that comes up. So unless I'm missing something, which is possible, I don't see how you can do anything except explain in the explanation box what happened. Is there a place for an attachment?
I'm going to be honest and say I have not looked at that specific page in some time. So we're going to capture that question. We're going to take a look at what additional information we need to share with you, and we'll get back to you.
I can
Okay,
answer
and just a
very
related
briefly
thing.
too.
Oh,
go
Can you,
ahead.
Aaron? Thank you.
Yeah, Mitch, I think you're right. When you click the next button down at the bottom right, then you're going to have an opportunity to upload some evidence. If I'm understanding your question right.
Okay. So once
So
we
I
get
think
to
you
that,
just haven't gone far enough through the challenge there to be able to attach your evidence to it. So.
and it seems to me, and am I reasonable to think that if you've got a CAI that doesn't really know fully what's available, because you're basically talking about it needs to be a fiber connection. So it may be, and I know there was 500 feet standard that MyHigh used, because I've looked through what comes up when you click on a CAI location, and aside from the triangles and the dots being confused in the locations, from the fabric, all that stuff that was talked about already, you get anything from no provider data to, but it's considered served, or you might get charter, gigabit by 35 megabits up available. So it seems like unless there's clearly an ISP that's claiming to deliver gigabit to that location, and then that is the case sometimes, the information that comes up in that left panel related to ISPs and speeds is not particularly relevant, because that's not enough to challenge simply to say the only ISPs that came up showed don't serve gigabit speeds. That's an insufficient, am I correct? That's an insufficient basis to challenge a CAI speed.
If the speeds offered weren't gig by gig, then you'd have a potential challenge opportunity there. Again, MyHigh is going to tread really carefully on not telling you what type of challenges to submit at any given location. We really want you to do your own due diligence on that. But if, as a CAI, if I'm understanding your question, there's not gig service there and you have evidence to substantiate that, then that's the kind of challenge you would put in, that there's not sufficient speed for it to be serviced as a CAI.
And so is that left panel, whatever it says in there regarding ISPs, lack of ISPs or ISPs not delivering that speed, that is some form of edit. Am I? See if you can answer this question.
Sure. That's the data that's in the map. The map is telling you that these ISPs claim that they service this location at these things. That's not going to be sufficient evidence for your challenge. You're going to have to substantiate that in an additional way.
Yeah, because what's happening in some of those cases is the interaction between the fact that many CAIs are not represented on the FCC map because they don't have an obligation under the Federal Broadband Data Act to track CAIs in the same way they do homes and businesses. So what you're seeing in some cases is the interaction that happens when MyHigh did the research to generate those 22,000 CAI locations. Some of them don't appear in the fabric, and therefore direct availability data would not have been reported for them through the BDC process. And so that's where the 500 feet proximity analysis comes in. And that's it's kind of an additional reason to say that this is an example of why the challenge process is so important, is that one of the things that's happening is we're combining a few different data sets, and we need people to help us make sure that as we're translating the FCC data sets alongside the additional research that we have done, that we're taking your expertise as on-the-ground members of your community, on-the-ground leaders in your community, if you're representing eligible challengers, to make sure that the information, as it talks to each other, is being translated together correctly.
Okay. And since until I put in an explanation, I can't hit the next button and see what the options are. Is there any suggestions you have for what the explanation should let that be, like a short summary of the evidence? In other words, this is well, basically a summary of the rationale and the evidence to support it. Is that a suitable use of that entry?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'd look for something relatively brief there, kind of the elevator speech on why the challenge or the rebuttal should be upheld.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll leave it at that for
Yeah. I'm
now.
going to toss one other. I'm
thing
just
on
going
the
to toss
guys-
one other thought up there, which is there are a very small number, but a non-zero number of ISPs that do not show up on the FCC map because they don't serve homes or businesses, but they do serve CAIs. And so that can be another way that a CAI location could be served, but we wouldn't have information to pull in from the BDC data collection to show there.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of things floating together.
Yeah, that in Ingham County, there's a case of that where somebody knows,
Yeah.
Anyway, and is there a way that for switching back to, availability challenges for, residents to standard locations, is there a way to, well, there's a way to explicitly see if an area challenge in a block group has been triggered? Let's say if I've submitted 5 challenges in a block group that has, requirement of 3 to trigger an area challenge, and MyHigh accepts those, and what are the steps where we could look at it and go, okay, we can be pretty confident that an area challenge has been triggered. We don't have to do any more specific locations. How do we learn that that's the case, either directly or indirectly?
Yeah. As of right now, the best way to look for that on the map is to look and see if additional locations that have that same service show up as challenged, right? Because the area challenge triggers a broader challenge, a challenge to a particular provider and technology across the whole census block group. There's not like a color overlay that's going to show up or things of that nature.
Right, but you could, just to see if I'm understanding, but you could check, one or a handful of locations in the same block group and say, okay, we didn't challenge that, and I don't see that, okay, all right. Okay, I'll let somebody else have the floor here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch. Hey, Jason, looks like you're ready to go there. Why don't you go next?
Yeah, just tagging on to what information for Mitch. Mitch, check with your county to see if they requested the shape files from when the infrastructure assessment was done 2 summers ago. That can help you determine whether or not you need to gather some additional evidence, because that might show whether a cable provider actually has infrastructure at that address. I know our counties requested that information, and it has helped us focus in on areas that might need the challenge. The second one is adding on to Jenny's first question, and I put a link in the chat to the specific to a example location. In our analysis, and this is it appears to be many locations statewide, not just in our region, residential locations that are getting classified as served because they're within 500 feet of PFN's service, which is not a residential service.
Yes. I'm looking up the specific page site for you here, but in initial proposal volume 1, we did submit here we go, a modification to business only services to residential locations modification that was approved by NTIA. However, after applying that to the map and then looking again, we see the same thing that you and Jenny are describing, Jason, which is to say that there continue to be some additional locations that the methodology laid out in IP Volume 1 didn't fully capture. So we are working on with Merit Network to develop a methodology that can address those, essentially the business-only service passing a residential location, so that those will not be deemed served.
Okay, so if
So we got
those
it, basically.
misclassifications, we just
Yeah.
bring those to your attention when they're broad, bring them to your attention and Merit's attention, and you'll consider, or you're working to get those reclassified, so we don't have to invest the energy in going out and challenging.
Yeah.
Great.
Quick question for Jason, if I may, just because he responded to what I said. Does the infrastructure, I can't remember, does the infrastructure map from the audit, does that note, if it's fiber, does it note the service provider, or just that it's transport versus, what, in other words, is there a company associated, like if you click on the red line or whatever it is, the network line, do you see who the service provider is, whose fiber it is, basically?
I'm not sure, because we really only had one type of service available for most of what that audit showed, and it was the cable providers. So
okay, well, I'll look into it. We do have access to that, so thank you for that suggestion.
My next question is for Merit, actually. Has there been any consideration to allowing, right now, the Merit Challenge portal? You can't even access it if you're not using a browser made by Google or a browser made by Apple. That is a significant challenge for people that fall on the other side of the digital divide.
Yeah, I guess where I'll come from with that is we built our extension on Google and Safari, so that's the main reason. So we've gotten this a lot from other communities about what about those who don't have internet access? How are they going to submit challenges? And I guess the best way would be just to reach out to them, to people's families who know that their families don't have internet, and kind of just send them their addresses, and we can look them up in the map and we can see what it looks like in terms of their internet service on the MyHigh map.
So Justin, I highly recommend that you, the Chromium version of Edge should also be allowed, because that the extension will, you can install the extension and you can navigate your tool. So the latest version of Microsoft Edge will alleviate a lot of your challenges, because people can't even view your resources if they aren't running one of those two browsers.
Yeah, I understand that. We had also picked Chrome and Apple Safari because they're the two most popular internet search browsers or internet search engines. But that is a great suggestion, and we can definitely look into that.
Thank you. I think my last question has already been answered, related to community anchor institutions. I think you might have, there's some of the community anchor institutions that are physically, there's a triangle on the map, but it's in the wrong place.
Mm-hmm.
And did you say that there's a specific type of challenge where we can provide the correct location, or?
Yeah, depending on essentially how significant the error is, it might be that you need two challenges, because you might have a location that needs to be challenged as this is not a CAI, and then a different location that is the correct one needs to be challenged for this is a CAI, if that makes sense.
Yes, that,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, so you might need to take one down and put one up. And so that might need to be how those are two different types of challenges, but the drop down menu and the options should make clear how to do those two things respectively.
okay, I think that was my my last point. I'll hang on in case something else comes up.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jason.
Jason.
Derek M., why don't you go next with your question?
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, wonderful. So first of all, thank you guys for your availability. We really appreciate the accessibility here. I'm just looking at some guidance regarding evidence files, and we'd like to confirm that the new guidance release allows participants, if necessary, to ensure completeness of our evidence file to submit larger than 5 megabytes or as large as possible. Is there a threshold on how many pieces of evidence and or size?
I remember off the top of my head that it's 5 potential files per challenge, so 5 uploads. I don't remember off the top of my head the overall size, but we will find that. And either if we get it back to you in the next hour, we'll say it right here in this meeting, and if not, we'll follow up.
Okay, awesome. And then I did just have one other question, just in terms of some of the conversations here today or frequently asked questions from other office hours. Will those be posted on the website at all?
Yes, we are working on a document that will capture the things said and frequently asked questions. We're going to have to make a call internally whether we just for today's discussion post it, post just this recording, or whether we transcribe it into a written document. It probably would be more efficient if we just put up this recording, but we have been working on the FAQs. A lot of FAQs were captured in that challenge guidance document, although it's not formatted, in a question answer format, and we'll have additional guidance to publish as well.
Okay, awesome. And I see in the chat someone had posted, 5 files per challenge, and each can be a maximum size of 5. If you guys could just confirm that, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, let's see, what did Matt post? He posted, yep, the 5 file types, 5 files per challenge, each a maximum of 5 megabytes.
Okay, so no larger than 5. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. We're going to go over to Tyler.
Hi, Aaron, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great, thank you. I know we've spoken recently. I have a couple of questions I was hoping I might be able to get clarified. The first question, last week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we were not able to submit challenges because of an issue with the mapping subcontractor. I'm wondering, has there been any dialogue as far as extending the challenge window, adding on an additional 3 days to account for that?
Tyler, I think the most that I can say right now is we noticed that too. We're talking about it. We don't have anything to share at this time. But we are looking for an appropriate solution.
Okay, great. And then my other question, I have 2 more. One is regarding community anchor institutions. I have noticed as I'm going through locations, some community anchor institutions are very, very vague as far as what exactly they are. Some are obvious, right? Libraries, township halls, stuff like that. But others, they just have a big, they might name the road as far as the name of the community anchors institution. It might just simply name the road that it's on, or maybe the township that it's in, but it doesn't actually say what that community anchor institution is. And, if you were to do, I had one the other day I did, and I just did a Google search. It's just a random house in a community, and there's no information as far as what this location is. As far as I know, maybe it's just a private residence, but there's no place, a centralized location that actually explains what each community anchor institution is and you know what it is responsible for.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is that in terms of figuring out um, which locations would have that triangle designation as we walk into the challenge process, that's all based on research that MyHigh did from data sources that we identify in initial proposal volume 1, and each of those approximately 22,000 locations is listed out in a file that is linked on page 13 of the initial proposal, which lists the locations and I want to make sure of what I'm about to say because I don't want to just work from memory here, but I believe it lists which category they fall into. It is very much our expectation that our research was, you know, a lot of the way there, but there will be things that need to be corrected because the example you give is that someplace maybe did work a year or two ago that has now stopped and no longer qualifies as that CAI definition, and that would be an entirely appropriate type of challenge to file.
Is there a location? No, I believe I did check the link as far as a comprehensive list of community anchor institutions, but with that list there was no, I mean, there was no description, right? A lot of these locations had an ambiguous name and it lacked a description as far as what specifically it was, what the purpose of the facility was.
So I just opened that file up, and in column M, there's explanation which describes which category we believe that each location falls into. So it might just say, this is an agricultural labor camp, this is on our list of boys and girls clubs, this is, and you know what, as I scroll down, I'm seeing some of the same thing that you're describing. A lot of those, just based on their name, they do say town hall or elementary school or library. But to the extent that there is someplace that we can't see a reason that it's a community anchor institution, and you want to say, here's my challenge, it's not a CAI because it's a private residence, and here's, evidence to that effect, then that's certainly a type of challenge that can be filed.
Well, and I guess that would be my ongoing concern is obviously I can easily clarify if a location is a library or a town hall. A quick Google search will reveal evidence that makes that apparent. However, a lot of the more ambiguous ones, you will do a search, just a simple Google search on the address, and nothing comes back, right? There's not a, typically when you put in an address, you'll get either a business name. I think I found one that was a daycare, or it was I think it was actually early education, like a preschool, that came back because I wasn't sure about that location, and then come to find out the preschool had closed several years ago, but it was still listed as a community anchor institution. So I guess my concern is that there are a lot of situations like that, and I'm just not sure as far as how to present evidence to you that will be clear as far as, hey, all I can offer is that this location is vague. I don't understand what it is, and when I try to search this location on Google, that there is no clarification as to why this location is a community anchor institution.
Yeah, I think what I would say is the reason it entered the process listed as a community anchor institution is because it came up in one of the data sets that we describe in IP Volume 1, and they can be removed if there is countervailing evidence that shows that they are not CAIs or they no longer are functioning as CAIs at that location. And that's about as far as I can go.
Well, I will just continue to, I guess, from the back and forth process, I'll just find out if what I'm submitting is sufficient, or or not. So I appreciate the answer there. And then my last one concerns service availability. We have deployed licensed fixed wireless since the latest BDC filing, and so obviously those do not show up in that, as served, but they are in fact served. What I recently has come to my attention is that in order for evidence to be approved, we need to prove that via a mobile test unit that we can provide 100 megabit by 20 megabit service at each location we stipulate as served. My question is, and no one's been able to give me a clear answer to this, is how are we to go out onto a private residence and run a test with a mobile unit? How is that practical?
Yeah, it's first off, Tyler, I want to say that is a fair question and a great question. And I know that you talked about it with Aaron this morning, and Aaron brought it back to the team as we met with our kind of daily challenge discussion. Aaron, I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but do you want to recap kind of where we were in that group discussion this morning?
That it's a very understandable barrier, that especially in rural areas where a residence might be down a very long driveway, that getting as close as possible with that mobile speed test unit is probably the best suggestion we have, with regard to your question, Tyler. I don't know if that gets it done, in terms of substantiating evidence or not. But certainly the other option would be to get permission from the property owners to go on the property and do the test. And that's certainly going to have to be something you guys decide as a provider, if it's worth your time and energy to do that.
Well, it's certainly worth our time and energy. We have obviously made a significant investment in deploying licensed by rural fixed wireless to provide service to these locations. I just that requirement, obviously there's a very logical situation here as far as being able to get on site on someone's property to do a speed test. So it just common sense would dictate, hey, this is in some situations this might not be possible. Obviously in some of these rural areas, people do not take kindly to people just showing up unannounced, from that aspect as well. So the requirements don't reflect reality as far as what is realistic from a standpoint of, like you just said, if a customer has a long driveway off of the road, short of testing out in front of the customer's house by the road, that's really the only way we could do a test, if we were to do it out in front of the customer's house out at the road.
Sure. We understand completely where you're coming from. And all we can do is go back to this idea that if there's a challenge submitted, there has to be data to corroborate it. There has to be evidence. So without the evidence, it's automatically probably going to be a rejected challenge. Not to be opaque or oblivious to the problem that creates for you as a provider, but there has to be evidence to submit that challenge of service is available. And
so if we build out, we're also going to be doing challenges with fiber service that we built out in the past 6 months. Will that be the same requirement that we would have to, if we have fiber facilities passing the customer's household? Do we need to provide a speed test? Do we need to do a speed test from that standpoint to prove that we can meet those those qualifications as far as minimum speeds?
No, because of the difference in the two products. I don't know, Jess, if there's more to add on to that.
No, I think that's exactly right. And that's, if you take a look at that guidance memo that we put out yesterday, one example was focused on a wired technology, a fiber or, other type of wired technology, and the other, the wireless technology. And there are real differences in the type of documentation that is required.
Okay. Last question I do have, actually, now that I've thought of it. I've noticed in areas where we do have fiber facilities passing in front of the house, however, the house is listed as unserved. I had one the other day that I came across that was about 900 feet off the road. But obviously our fiber does pass right past the customer's driveway, but it wasn't caught in the initial coverage area because it was beyond 500 feet. What would you suggest in a situation like that?
That sounds to me very much like a availability services available type challenge.
What evidence would you like to see as far as, showing that we do in fact have fiber facilities passing that location, and we could service the customer if the customer did technically want the service?
Yeah. There are, I'm going to find a site for you. Hang on. Oops. Sorry, I'm scrolling to the correct section. There we go. So pages 32, and nope, I am in the rebuttal section, not the evidence section of the user guide. All right, so page 23 of the user guide talks about specific examples of evidence could include a geospatial as-built diagram or file of infrastructure that has been deployed. We also would be looking for evidence to contain like a legend that would help us understand specifically what is shown on that diagram, and we still have those same basic standards around we have to clearly identify which addresses are or which BSLs are shown in the evidence, and then the download and upload speeds and the latency available to those locations. And there are some other bullet points there on page 23 of the user guide, but I think that might be the one I read out might be the one that would interest you the most.
Okay.
In this
Thank you.
instance that you're describing. Yeah.
Or a copy of the offer that you've offered them service at the location would be good evidence there.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. We're going to go over to Tammy Smith. Tammy, what questions do you have?
Hi, Aaron. Hi, Jessica. Thanks again for making time available. I have a funding question. So PFN received the NTIA Middle Mile Grant, infrastructure grant, and we do not see the community anchor institutions that would be that they wouldn't be funded necessarily, but they would have access to funding. I'm sorry, not funding. They would have access to service as a result of our middle mile infrastructure being deployed. And so my question is whether MyHigh was planning to add the NTIA grant funding into the map. So we have an obligation to fund, not fund, I keep saying the wrong word, I'm sorry, but to make service available to community anchor institutions within 1,000 feet of where our infrastructure will be deployed. Yeah. And we noticed that that's not on there.
Yeah, that sounds to me like an enforceable commitment type challenge. So that is a way that you could file those challenges through the portal.
Okay. Okay. But that would be on us to file those?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Of course, Tammy, thank you. And the reason that we would look for that to be provided through the challenge process is because we do need that information about like specifically which locations are going to receive service through that enforceable commitment. So for programs that didn't include an award where it was specifically, like the Robin grants were awarded on a location by location basis. Your award includes 123 Main Street, 129 Main Street, whatever. For awards that aren't like that, then we do need that information from the potential provider, in this case, from PFN.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Early on in the chat, Janet asked a similar question about enforceable commitment. So I'm going to violate what I said earlier and read a chat question just because it applies to what we just talked about. The question was, if our company has an enforceable commitment and the location shows or underserved with the enforceable commitment, do we need to challenge those locations as a company? And I feel like that was kind of the answer we just said, that yes, you'd probably want to put an enforceable commitment challenge there.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
All right, Mitch, why don't you go ahead next? Mitch Walker.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Hey, it's working this time. Good. Would you mind if I shared my screen so I can just show you where I'm on the map? It'll probably make things faster.
Sure.
Keep it PG.
Okay. So are you seeing the map right now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Couple things came up, and I have some answers about community anchor institutions. This is our elementary and middle school.
Yeah.
And you can see there's not even an address associated with it.
Yep.
But if I go over here, okay, here's the Powell Township Elementary School. So I think what I've got going on is I've got to do two things. I've got to challenge this. This is a private residence. How do I add the Powell Township School to this process? Is that a challenge as well?
It is a challenge, and this is the one instance where you have to email us about a challenge, and that's because there are people who know a lot more about GIS than I do, helped reach the conclusion that there are a lot of back-end programming issues about like trying to do a challenge through drop a pin on the map. And so you email us at leo.myhighspeedinternet@michigan.gov.
Would you put that in the chat for me? Thanks.
Yeah, what I'm going to do instead is actually find the citation in the user guide and send it. But yes, we will get that in the chat. So yeah, so you'll challenge, I can't quite see at this point. Yep, you're going to challenge the location you've clicked on right now as not a CAI. You're going to then send us an email with the information.
Yep. And then I'm going to send you the address information and whatever you need about the school that's located here.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to move the map a little bit here. This is where I'm sitting. This is our town hall. It's obviously a community anchor institution.
Yep.
Right here is the fire hall, which they've got labeled correctly. So once again, I need to add this as a community anchor institution. Once again, email that information to you.
Yes, and please as two separate emails.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. Related question. I'm going to back the map up here a little bit. We have fiber, I believe, coming up our road. We're kind of a dead end road out of Marquette. And that's why you see all these served here. And we have an internet provider called 906 Technologies. Okay, so that's who's actually providing the service. But if you go into town here and click, I'm coming up with PFN. So my understanding is PFN doesn't provide service to the home.
Yeah.
So is this one of these things where because they're running commercial service up to the Huron Mountain Club, everybody in town's getting confirmed as PFN?
This is, we had those questions earlier in the call about if you see there okay, so you see the location type is residential, but then if you look over in that list of providers far to the right, Peninsula Fiber Network is providing non-residential service. And so this is, I think both, it was Jenny and Jason, I think, who had questions about non-residential or business-only service passing residential locations. And this is an example of PFN providing non-residential service past this location does not mean that this residential location is served. And so we're working with Merit on those bulk challenges. I want to check
so
the other
that
parties.
Would be a bulk challenge. I don't have to go and have these people all challenge.
That would be something that we are working on. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Do you need information from me on that?
No, not at this point.
Okay.
So the second question about 906 wireless, I was trying real quickly to find them in the FCC provider database.
No, they're fiber. They're not wireless.
Oh, they're not. Okay. Do you happen to know 906 does not show up when I try to search real quick on the FCC BDC site, which is not necessarily the same. Their reporting name is not always the name that they're advertising in town, because they could be having a
Right.
different corporate name or something like that. So if we know that they are fiber, then that is a BEAD qualifying technology. Sometimes service that people expect to see is not showing up on the map because it is not a BEAD qualifying technology. Maybe it's satellite service, maybe it's unlicensed fixed wireless service, things of that nature. But if it's a BEAD qualifying service not showing up on the map, then that is a challenge that should be filed as availability service is available. And there's, I think the memo that came out yesterday is probably the clearest set of guidance, or at least we think and hope it's the clearest set of guidance.
Okay.
But the user guide also has good and useful information about what it looks like to file those challenges.
Okay. And just to throw another wrinkle into it, this property I have highlighted here,
Mm-hmm.
this individual has fixed wireless from Northern Michigan University, and their equipment is right on top of our water tower there.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still showing up as having non-residential service, but I'm not seeing any of our residents that have Northern Michigan's fixed wireless showing up on this map.
Yeah. There is a little bit of back and forth conversation that has happened with NMU that is not necessarily something we're going to go, take this whole group into on this call right here. But broadly speaking, what I would say is the same thing that was on the cover note for the guidance yesterday, which is to say that, location, when we're facing a challenge process with a relatively limited amount of time, because we do have a deadline for the end of the challenge submission phase. The most important challenges, if you're having to make, the most important challenges, if you're having to make decisions about what is a good use of time to file, are those that are going to move locations from served to underserved or unserved or vice versa. And so if you have a location that has access to a service that doesn't meet the 100 by 20 underserved threshold or the 25/3 unserved threshold, then that location is not necessarily going to be made BEAD eligible or made not BEAD eligible based on that challenge. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
Okay.
So this individual here who is getting NMU service, which does not meet the threshold for speed,
Mm-hmm.
he's getting it through NMU. Would he have to submit a challenge?
So this individual right here in this particular location, if there is a when there is a successful challenge that says this individual does not have access to the service shown on the map because he's a residential location and the only service showing on the map is non-residential, then that would change his status to unserved.
Okay.
If NMU were to challenge and that service were to appear on the map at 25/5, then that location at best would be served or would be listed as underserved.
Underserved. Gotcha.
And
Okay.
for that reason, that location is likely still or will still be BEAD eligible, even if that challenge goes through to represent that service. If this location is served by a fiber or another wire technology or a licensed fixed wireless technology that meets that 100 by 20 threshold, then this location might be shown properly as served, and that would not be BEAD eligible.
Okay.
Does that make more sense now? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I got it. One last quick question. I've been searching around trying to find if anybody in Marquette County is working on this, because I'm just a small township here.
Yeah.
Would you have any of that information that you could just email me or post or something?
I don't think we've gotten the question to share about user accounts, and off the top of my head, I don't think I can share that, like specifically whether somebody signed up for an account or not. So if you're not in direct communication with county officials or other townships, then I would actually encourage you to reach out to Merritt, who is working with community leaders all over the state and might be in a better position to put you in touch than we can
Okay.
within the state broadband office, who has responsibility for like adjudicating challenges, because we don't have our thumb on the scale for,
Okay.
Well, trying to
the,
organize or not.
I'm the clerk up here. I've been
Yeah.
working with the clerk in Marquette County. She's passed me on to the director of IT. He passed me on to PFN. So that just went right down the hole. So I can't find anybody in the county that's working on this. So I will check with Merritt. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Mitch. Let's go over to Trey. Trey, are you
Sorry,
there?
couldn't
Can you
find my
hear
mic.
us? There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me? All right, perfect. So I'm going to piggyback on that community anchor institution question. I've got one of our small locals, LEAs. I work with Market Teresa, and so they are not listed on that map as a community anchor institution. And in fact, the triangle is at the corner of their road or driveway, and they're listed as the fire hall. And the fire hall is listed up past them. How do I have this small school place a challenge, because they are not funded. They are not. They aren't served. They are a DSL connection at best.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so sorry. Can you walk through the locations? You said the CAI triangle is appearing just on a corner, and then
Yeah.
I just didn't catch the whole series. Can you just walk through the locations and how they're shown again real quick?
Yeah, sure. So the driveway to the school is on the corner of County Road 426.
Yep.
So if you type in 38211 County Road 426, the triangle shows up at the base of the road, and you can see the driveway to the school. And then past that, you'll see the Wells Township Pool and a red dot that shows as residential, which in fact I think is actually the fire hall.
Okay.
So my question is, the school's not listed as a community anchor.
Yep.
Which it most certainly is.
Yep.
And in fact, this whole area is unserved for broadband. So my question is, what is the best step for us to help the school district make sure that they list it as an anchor?
Well, the first thing is that any eligible challenger can submit a challenge to say this location is a CAI. So you can actually do that challenge, and also the one for the fire hall. Just, as an eligible challenger, you're able to submit that for them. So that's probably the most direct way to help them out.
Is that through, did I hear it properly, that is an email to you, or through the actual, through the site?
Yeah, two things there. I think, if I caught it correctly, described one BSL that should be a CAI, a circle that should be a triangle. That happens through the portal. And you described another situation where there is no triangle, but there's no circle or triangle where there should be a triangle. And that is the sole instance where there does have to be an email.
Okay. I think that makes sense. And then to follow up,
if the dot is on the map, Trey, you can submit a challenge. If the location isn't on the map, then you're going to have to email us.
Then you have to email you. Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. To follow up to with Mitch there up in Big Bay, there is, so I know that 906 works with PFN to provide residential service. And I think that may be part of some of the confusion, because they act as like they do all the residential service as part of like a subcontract with them. Not sure the entire details of that, but that's my understanding of how 906 is involved in that particular area.
Got it. Thank you for that. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trey. Jackie B., you're next.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And I'll apologize in advance, because I feel like my brain is short-circuiting with the CAI concept. But to also follow up on Mitch and a similar concept, quite a few of our addresses, when you search for them, it says address not found, like it's almost like an error. but then when you look on the map, there is indeed a triangle nearby. And in many times those triangles are correctly labeled. They're just, and they might be in the right location even. It's just the when you search for the address, it's essentially like an error message.
Yeah.
Is that an email? Should we email you about those, or what do we do in that instance?
So the important thing that I think you said there is that there is a triangle that you can click on that shows the correct address. So you search for 123 Main Street and then it says not found, but you navigate to it on the map and you click on the spot, and that this is what Lynn was speaking to early in the call. And this is some of those things that filter down to us that originate from issues with the FCC fabric. If it is showing up correctly, like if you can find the correct address on the map, if you can navigate to it, click on it, that correct address is located, then you do not need to submit a challenge unless you need to change like a characteristic of it, right? Like if it is showing up with the wrong kind of service or something like that.
Okay. And then I thought I understood with when Mitch was saying, because we have some similar situations where it's like the pin will drop in the wrong location. And then also the information is just wrong in some cases, where there's the wrong location, there's the wrong address. And so if in any, I guess I thought I understood, but then your answer to the previous person, I feel like just contradicted it. So I thought I was good. So because I sent an email about this because I thought it was a very, very specific instance where you could email. And I didn't think that like any of our locations really fit that. And then in Mitch's comment, I was like, oh, we can email. Great. Because we have basically about 75 CAIs, and there's like 50 of them that fit some issue, whether it's the pin drop, the address not found, a wrong location, a wrong address, etc. And so I can't just email you a spreadsheet. Like you're just going to get like probably either 30 plus challenges or 40 plus challenges and like 5 emails. Is that could happen given the circumstances of having so many with inaccurate information?
For purposes of being able to file them and document them for NTIA, we would prefer, if at all possible, to get separate emails, you know, so that there's a clean trail for each.
Yes.
I'm
not happy to do that, but I just wanted to make sure that you were okay if all of a sudden you started getting a dozen plus emails from the same person. Rapid fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are happy to do that. I also am just going to drop into the chat a specific link. So on our challenge process website, there's a section for CAIs that maybe will help with some of these questions. In particular, if you open up challenge process for CAIs, the little drop down on the CAI page, you can watch back the webinar that we did for CAIs and also review the presentation slides that may or may not be helpful. But I hope that they will be helpful in answering some of the questions. I'm kind of a visual learner, so sometimes it helps me to have that document to go back and look at.
Jackie, did you have anything else?
I feel like I have 40 questions, but it's fine. And we're all asking like some of the same questions, so I just appreciate it, but I'm good for right now.
All right, sounds great. David Cleveland, you're next.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good session here. Appreciate you doing this. So I'm a fixed wireless and fiber ISP that services several Michigan counties, and we have a fixed wireless competitor who has severely overstated their coverage across many counties in the state here to, I'm sure, just to prevent the fiber funding from going on. They do actually have equipment on the towers. It is broadcasting, but we can't find any customers for this company. We haven't lost any customers. We cannot find any customers. We drive the roads. We cannot find any customers. So we can't go get a speed test from someone. You know, we can pull out spectrum analysis equipment and we can look at what's going on with the signals and do different spot checks of RSSIs, dB levels, look at that against the equipment that they're operating from, and look at the modulation specifications for that equipment, and prove out that they cannot produce the speeds that they're claiming that they are counting them or having them show up as served locations now, because it's physically just not possible. There's got to be a process to challenge this, and I'm pretty sure you all know who we're talking about, but there's got to be a mechanism for another ISP to be able to disprove this information, whether it be that detailed site survey propagation maps or site survey data from specific locations of addresses and so on, running that into the modulation mechanisms that's going to prove or disprove speed, or even serviceability, because that's another area that they claim service in certain areas, and it's flat not possible. We've been doing this for 18 years. We understand how wireless works. What about the use of propagation maps, such as Google Network Planner, loading in the equipment specifications that for what they're doing? What mechanism do we have to challenge this?
Yep. Good and fair questions, David. And it's good to chat with you. So what it sounds like you're describing is an availability service is not available type challenge. And you can find a lot of information about this in initial proposal volume 1, but I think that you'll find, which page am I on? Page 22 and the very first part of 23 of the user guide to really be the place to look for thinking about what sort of evidence you might be interested in. So that really gives bullet points that lay out the types of things that would be required for a challenge that focuses on providers denying requests for service, not offering the technology at the location, not offering the speeds that they are showing on the map, that a wireless signal is not available at this location, or that new non-standard construction would be, or new non-standard equipment construction would be required. So all of those things, and there are specific bullet points that list out different types of supporting evidence, but all of those things are kind of subcategories of services not available type challenges. I also want to pause here and talk about area challenges, which is to say that a threshold value number of challenges to a specific provider's specific technology offering inside a census block group is going to shift that burden of proof, so that it's not just about that that small handful of actual challenges that were submitted, but instead becomes broader. And so for a wired technology, then that would trigger every location served by that provider. We would look for evidence from that challenged provider. We'd look for rebuttal from them that demonstrates that they can provide the service they say they provide to all the locations they say they provided in that census block group. For fixed wireless technologies, it's a little bit different. Once you hit that threshold value and trigger the area of accepted challenges, and the area challenge is triggered, then we produce a representative random sample. So randomly selected, but from across that census block group based on kind of a geographic basis. So that we're not just capturing, one particular location if the random locations all came out there. So it's random but spread across, randomly selected but across the census block group. And then those are the locations that the provider must demonstrate that they are able to serve in order to demonstrate that they can retain all of the service claims that they have in that census block group. Is that helpful enough? Do you have additional clarifying questions?
No, I mean, it's helpful. I can see that. I mean, we're just dealing with, there's thousands of them that are going to have to be dealt with in this county area. And, we can look at it and just shake our head and go, this is not possible. And in the short window that we've got, and, we roll cruise and do that spectral analysis and propagation software, analysis. And I guess we'll do that stuff in addition and read through the very detailed items that you've pointed out here on 22 and 23. I'll dig into that deeper to do that, and we'll see where we go from there, I guess.
Yeah, and the other thing I can say, and we've said this in a couple of other meetings, but I want to lift up here, is that we have, My High, have done research related to places that we have specific concern about overstatement of coverage. And if you're interested in seeing that information, then we can make it available to you.
I would love to see that information. Absolutely.
Yeah. Just do me the favor and go ahead and email us at that leo.myhigh address with that request.
Okay. All right. We'll do that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Jessica.
Yeah.
Jess, if there's just one quick thing too that I can add to that is,
yes,
if you pick the addresses that you have in mind, it will tell you if it's already been challenged or not. So somebody may have already done that work for you. So hopefully it could save somebody some time. So I would also recommend that before you start doing some propagation models.
Yeah. Thanks, Allie. That's a great
Thank you,
additional point
Allie.
there.
Bill, looks like you're the last one with your hand up. Why don't you go ahead and let us know what your question is?
Perfect. So first, I want to thank you guys to have these open sessions. This is like a lifeline in the middle, and I'm in the middle of the ocean. I don't know which direction to go. So if I could, let me share my screen, and you guys can, it'll help me because we're a small cable operator. We offer about 300 megs of internet service. This is our service area. And somehow these orange areas should not be orange. They should be green because we're offering at least 300 megabits of downstream and 100 megabits of upstream for all of the residents. In addition, we're in the midst of overbuilding ourselves with fiber to the home. So we'll be able to offer over 2 gigabits of bandwidth to any of the customers, including the ones that are already green. So how do I update this and have it reflected in your map, because it's not there? And the ones in red, that also shouldn't be red because we cover 100% of the service area. So I'm lost at this point.
Yeah.
What do I need to do?
Bill, you work with the city of Wyandotte, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So there actually has been conversation with Paul Lemaines and Joe and John are also up to speed on this. And so I want to, rather than speaking specifically about the filing information, and I certainly don't know kind of where things are in process on your side, I want to point you back to that team and set of individuals.
Okay, understood. I know
yeah.
Paul, John, and John.
Perfect.
And Joe. So
there you go.
I will sync up with those guys.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. I'll unshare. Turn it back over to you guys.
Thanks, Bill. Jess, I have a sense that maybe there's unanswered questions from the chat. I'm not sure the best way to go through them. If anybody's still here in our meeting that knows they have a chat question that hasn't been answered, maybe that's a good first way. Otherwise, we'll just start looking through them. Go ahead, Tim.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We did hear you, but now you're muted again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you are.
Okay. So my question is specific to the screenshot that I put in the chat on that green completed tab. You can see I've got 50 of 180 items there. So I'm guessing 180 items that were placed in there. Is there anything that I need to do with those? I think we talked about it earlier, but I just want to make sure I'm crystal clear on that.
Yep, nope, completed is completed. No additional steps to take.
So then my next question is, how did they get there? Well, I don't think we placed anything in there, and they had a 3/24 date, which was the date before the site went live.
That is an excellent question, and I don't know the answer to it, but we're going to find it out and we'll get back to you.
Okay, and I'll shoot you a follow-up email,
Oh, please
Jessica, on
do.
that.
Yes, please do.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Tim. And anyone else here still here in the meeting that has an unanswered question that maybe went in the chat initially that we haven't answered to this point? Or maybe even if it wasn't your question and you see that it's in the chat and it didn't get answered, that could be helpful to you.
The one thing I would say is Jackie has made an excellent suggestion about some additional guidance around CAIs, and we certainly will work on that. In a moment of total transparency, there are some things that we do inside of state government that have to do with ADA accessibility and document review and all of those things, which is to say, I can't necessarily promise you we're going to turn it down or turn it around absolutely immediately, but we will do our best to get that out as quickly as we can, because yes, you're right, there's been a lot of questions on that and additional guidance could be helpful.
See that Jeff just raised his hand. Jeff, what question do you have, or do you see that we need to talk about?
No, it was just the accessibility thing raised a question in my mind. We had reached out about someone on our team who's colorblind, and therefore the map is impossible to use. Is there an update on that?
I had emailed, I had heard from Matt about that and sent him a link to an extension that was recommended by our developer.
Okay.
If that extension is not meeting the needs of your user, then let us know and we will pursue additional solutions.
Okay, I'll follow up and find out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Just want to remind everybody that we will do these office hours throughout the challenge process on Thursdays. And then towards the end, we're also going to add a Tuesday opportunity. You guys have the links to all those. Feel free to share those with anybody who you think might benefit from being able to come in and ask questions. Jason, what do you have?
Just one thing we've come across locations that have enforceable commitments, and those enforceable commitments are really to two different companies or two different service providers that fall under the same holding company. Like there's and it's kind of northwest of Trout Lake, where there's an enhanced ACAM that would be an enforceable commitment for Licht Corporation, and then there's likely a USDA Reconnect commitment to Alpha Enterprises, which I believe is held by the Licht holding company. Is there something that we should do about those types of locations? Or is that something that should we just bring those types of things to MyHigh's attention and let you deal with them? Or is there some type of challenge that we should?
Yeah, Jason, I was flipping for the best resource as you were posing the question, but because of that, I'm going to say it back to you and make sure I heard everything while I was asking my brain to do two things at once. So you're saying in these enforceable commitments, you have reason to believe that particular locations are going to be missed, or you have reason to believe that the entire enforceable commitment is going to fail, default, not be built?
I have reason to believe that there's enforceable commitments to a single location, two separate enforceable commitments, double funded to location. So
Okay.
A location that has enforceable commitments from two different funding sources to what essentially are the same company.
Got it. For purposes of the BEAD program, a location having double funding from a pre-existing federal program would have the same effect as if it just had one, right? It would not be BEAD eligible. And so if both of those locations, or if both of those funding commitments, yeah, I guess there's not really a lot to challenge so long as that location is showing as funded on the map. In the event that one of those locations didn't have that little chip or tag that shows funded, then you would want to challenge that if you have knowledge that a location is already included in an enforceable commitment. Now, one thing to know specific to the programs you're describing is that some past funding programs were not necessarily location specific. Some had carve outs for you can skip what was the impracticable locations or things of that nature, or you could build to 95% and have that count as your commitment. Or you could fulfill your obligation to that other funding program with technology that might not necessarily be BEAD qualifying technology. And so earlier in the year, before the challenge process launched, MyHigh went to organizations with those enforceable commitments and asked for location by location specific information. And so it may be that we received information that a particular location that appears to fall in an enforceable commitment footprint may, for whatever reason, still be BEAD eligible because that particular location is not going to be built using a BEAD qualifying technology, and therefore that particular location should be BEAD eligible. But we'd still be happy to review through the challenge process if you see places where you think there's an error.
Yeah, and it's a half mile down the road, you've got an RDOF commitment.
Yeah.
And then a half mile to the east, it's an RDOF commitment. To the west, it's a USDA reconnect and a enhanced ACAM commitment. And they're about a half mile apart.
Yeah.
You got 2 locations over here and 3 locations over here. These
So
3
definitely a
locations are
rural
RDOF,
area in need of service.
and they're 3 essentially 3 different providers within in very rural areas, which could result in a lot of duplication of funding.
Yeah. For our purposes, the most important thing is that any location that already has an enforceable commitment, or in this case, multiple enforceable commitments, because we cannot deconflict those federal programs against each other. But any location that is funded for through an enforceable commitment for a BEAD qualifying technology does not also get funded through BEAD. Right? To step back into the true big picture, when we think about past broadband funding programs, the ARA programs, the BTOP, all of it, we sit here and we say like, oh, not all of that funding went where it needed to go. Not all of that funding went to the locations that needed it the most. The overarching goal of the state challenge process is to make sure that 10 and 15 years down the road, that we look back and instead this time say, we correctly identified the locations that needed that service constructed. And so that is the overarching goal of what we're trying to do, right? Is identify locations that need funding through the BEAD program to have that infrastructure constructed. So that's kind of that underlying core goal.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing the feds starting to deduplicate some of that funding through their mechanisms. So
yeah.
So when we come across that, we'll just if we think we need your opinion, we'll gather your opinion on it. So.
We appreciate that. Yeah, we're gonna stay super focused on correctly identifying those BEAD eligible locations, and other agencies, as you note, are doing things too, and we're gonna do what we need to do to make the BEAD program work.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing locally, is making sure that any
100%.
location that should be BEAD eligible is BEAD eligible, because every location that isn't
Yep.
reduces the funding that gets invested in infrastructure in our communities.
Jason, you're going to have to do the intro for the next time we do one of these office hours, because that's exactly right.
I would be happy to do that.
I see Mitch's hand up. We only have just about 30 seconds left, but if it's a quick hit question.
Oh, well, I think it might be, it piggybacks on what Jason was talking about. If there's I sent Jessica, you and Eric an email about this, but there's some confusion about EACAM in Benzie County there. And it's currently, there's no coverage shown there. So can we assume that that is considered unserved and eligible for BEAD?
Locations
yeah.
locations that show unserved or underserved and do not show funded would be eligible for BEAD, yes. If it needs to
Okay,
be
so it would be,
corrected, then the challenge
if
process is how we'd change it.
Right, and that would be the ISP would say, we have signed up with the EACAM and it's funded, committed. But as of now, the assumption is it's not, so we don't have to challenge it. They may challenge it. And if that's the case, then does My High have to deal with that? We don't rebut. It's just sort of between the carrier and My High.
Yeah, any availability services available type challenges that provide sufficient evidence to be accepted go into the open rebuttals queue. They can be rebutted, but there's no direct rebutter, right? If you submit a challenge against Acme Internet and provide sufficient evidence that that challenge is accepted, then Acme gets notified of a challenge against their service. If Acme provides, then we flip this on its head. Acme provides evidence to how the service is available challenge, but I don't have your email address at your house. And so I instead place that in that open rebuttals queue. It could be rebutted, but there is not a direct rebutter available who is notified. So,
but if
yeah.
if it's an EACAM situation, the carrier would simply provide evidence to My High saying, it's a different challenge. It would be, this is a
enforceable commitment.
Committed and enforceable commitment. So that hasn't happened yet, but it may happen. Is that reasonable to assume, since there's some confusion about whether they've accepted the EACAM offer?
Challenges can be submitted anyway, all the way, or any moment, all the way up through 11:59 p.m. on April 23. But broadly speaking, I think we have most of the enforceable commitment information captured. So I wouldn't lose sleep over it, but it doesn't hurt to check back.
Okay.
Just want to say thank you to everybody for coming to office hours today. Be here next week, same time, same station.
Thanks, everybody. This has been a great discussion.